Welcome to another episode of Power Move Makers. This series was created with a simple goal in mind: to bring to the table high-level executives, successful entrepreneurs, and just all-around inspiring human beings. Not just shining a spotlight on their successes, but more important, deep diving into the journey that they took to get there. Now, this week's guest is somebody I read about and was instantly inspired by his story. Former inmate who becomes a multi-million-dollar entrepreneur. You know, I can't wait to get into a story and share it with you guys. He created a service that allows inmates, as well as those who love them, to stay in communication with one another and do it affordably. And for anybody out there who has ever either been in prison or love someone who's been in prison, you do understand how expensive it can get just staying into communication. So please welcome to this week's Power Move Makers, Mr. Frederick Hutson. Welcome to Power Move Makers.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Fred, like I said, I read about your story and I thought I got to get this guy on our show because you are exactly what this series was created for. I wanted to bring forth people who didn't start with a silver spoon in their mouth. People who started with all of the obstacles in the world stacked against them and still found a way to excel and make something out of themselves. So your story fits right into the sweet spot of what Power Move Makers is all about.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Let's take it to the beginning. Before we get to your company, Pigeon League, where'd you grow up? What was your circumstances like, you know, from the very beginning? Are you from a two-family household? You know, were you guys well off? Do you come from the suburbs? Do you come from the inner city? What did your upbringing look like?
Yeah, so I was born in Brooklyn, New York, on Flatbush Avenue. And then when I was about 13, my mother moved us to St. Petersburg, Florida, because that's where she's originally from. That's where her side of the family was at. So my mom and dad had been separated for my entire childhood. So it was all I knew was just my mom. And one of the things that stuck with me, you know, as growing up, is I just always saw, and it was normal for me to see her ability to make ends meet and to take care of us because I have 3 other siblings. So it was normal to see her, you know, working multiple jobs and doing side jobs, and, you know, she would do catering on the side. And so it was normal for me to see her make ends meet to take care of us. So it wasn't until I got older where I realized that my reality wasn't necessarily everyone's reality growing up. And, you know, us just learning, you know, me learning and my siblings learning just to be content with what we had, you know, at a young age. I mean, we grew up in a 1-bedroom and it was all 4 of us. So, you know, it was one of those things where for me, you know, as a child, it felt normal because it's all you knew. But it's not until you get older where you really could have a level of appreciation above and beyond when you realize, you know, for me particularly, like how my mother really took care of us and held it down, you know, growing up.
Got you. You said your mom and dad weren't together. Did you have a relationship with your dad though?
Yeah, so I built a relationship with my dad more so as an adult. They were divorced before I was born, and towards as I got older and, you know, leaving the house, you know, in my teens, that's when I started to get more of a relationship. What's funny in this story is that my mom and dad ultimately ended up getting back together. They're together now. So
are you serious?
Yeah. It's gone full circle. So, you know, my relationship with my dad was something that was built of us, you know, more so me being an adult versus being a child and growing up with the dad around.
Got you. Before we move too far in the story, just in terms of your family dynamic, your family background, we know, I believe the statistics, and you might know it a little better than I do, 1 in every 3 Black males will enter the system at some point in their life. Is this something that has plagued your family before you entered the system? Or are you kind of the black sheep of the family, if you will, that your family was upstanding, but you were the one who kind of got off track and made it into the system?
Yeah, so a little bit of both. So amongst my siblings, I'm the only one that has ever gotten in any real trouble. So I'm definitely the black sheep in that side. But when it comes to my cousins and uncles, it would be crazy because I remember as a child saying, "Hey, where's such and such?" And they'd be like, "Oh, he's gone," or the joke would be, "Oh, he's at college," and then they would laugh at me because I would believe it because I was a kid. I didn't know, but he really was locked up. So it just was one of those things where a lot of my uncles I would see come in and out, cousins see coming in and out, and in St. Petersburg at that time. So St. Petersburg back then was very segregated. Like most of the white people lived on the north side, and most of the black people lived on the south side. And it was just a lot of crime and illegal activity going on. And the more, at least in the neighborhood that I was in, the main economy was the drug economy. That was the main economy, at that time. So it was normal. It was normal to see, heavy police presence. It was normal to see people getting locked out and getting back out or posting bond like that. That was a normal. But then again, it's not until you get older and you get into other areas where you realize that's not fucking normal, right?
That's
so
right.
You don't notice it until you're outside of it. But for me growing up, it was what I knew, it was what I saw. So it was nothing to see my cousins being chased by the police and driving his car from my grandma's yard and jumping out and running. I mean, that's, we saw it all the time. So it was just one of those things where it was just, the environment that I was in, and those turned into my role models. It wasn't someone who, my images of success, was really two people, as I was growing up. One was my uncle who, he always had the nice cars and stuff like that. And he was in the Air Force, which was different. But then everybody else was my cousins, uncles who was hustling, and it was just in the streets. And they had even nicer cars and clothes and jewelry and girls and all that kind of stuff. So, those became my images of success growing up. And, it really swayed my view of, what I wanted to do, because the people that I saw, doing the quote unquote, school or other stuff, I didn't necessarily see them with the lifestyle that I felt was appealing. So it wasn't really attractive. So, especially when you're young like that, it can be very impressionable on you, at that age.
No, absolutely. And it's, it's so sad because coming from these impoverished neighborhoods where the options are few at best,
Yep.
When you're young, the people who are getting money usually are not getting it legally.
Right.
So that story is just far too common. Talk to me. What type of student were you? Were you a great student? Were you above average? Were you below average? Did you finish high school? Did you go on to college?
Yeah. I finished high school. School was easy for me. Like, I mean, I never had a problem, learning. I never had a problem, retaining information. And one of these traits that I think is a very entrepreneurial trait is that most entrepreneurs have the ability to learn exceptionally fast. You learn at a very fast rate. And I think that's a trait of every entrepreneur I know. So in school, it wasn't something that interests me where, I never really considered going to college. I mean, I know everyone around me said, hey, this is what you're supposed to do. And it's just a pattern you're supposed to follow. But I never was interested in it. But I did graduate high school without a problem. I was an A/B student. And I wasn't really applying myself. Like, I mean, I was selling weed in school. So it wasn't like, it was just like I went because I had to go. My mother was not going to let me go. So, school was just one of those things. But it wasn't something that I wasn't big on sports. I didn't really do a lot of school activities because my focus outside of school was making money. That's what I was always thinking about. And that's what my focus was. So my extracurricular activities was always centered around that, whether it was back when you used to burn CDs off of LimeWire and Napster and sell mixtapes, or if you was doing yard cutting grass or just whatever, car wash, whatever. My mindset growing up from middle school to high school was always just, how to make money and how to grind.
You talk about something that it seems to be a thread through most entrepreneurs. Long before we discover that word entrepreneur, if we look back over the course of our life, all of us thought the same. Like, because even as you're speaking, I'm thinking about myself. As we come up, everything is a hustle trying to get money, whether it's cutting grass, paper routes, doing whatever selling whatever you can to get money. Is this something for yourself? And we're going to move the interview along. But did you identify yourself back then as an entrepreneur, or did you have aspirations of being an entrepreneur? And I ask you this, number one, because the majority of our audience who watch this series or listen to it in podcast form, they're entrepreneurs. And they're listening in because they want to get information and gems from people like yourself who's been successful at it. But I know most of us are taught conformity. Most of us are taught it's only one way to the finish line, which I completely disagree with. So is it for you, looking back, did you always want to be an entrepreneur? Did you always know I wanted, and I might not know what a business is, but one day I want to own my own business, or were you just a natural born hustler?
Yeah, I think for me, it was really about seeing problems and being new, and me understanding at an early age that if I fix someone's problem, they're going to be more than happy to pay me for it. And I think that's as far as I thought about it. It's like, okay, well, you have slow internet speed, but I have better internet speed. And if you want to download this music, you can't download it. I can sell it for $5. I solved your problem. I'm gonna make $5 off of it, right? So that's as far as I went with it. It's just that, if I solve someone's problem, they will pay me for that solution. And I think that's all entrepreneurship is. It's just a series of problem solving. And, when you solve a problem for someone, or if you solve a problem for a great number of people, that's more than, they're more than willing, not only more than willing to pay you for it, but, that's definitely a path to, wealth and revenue and so on and forth. And then all the things we use every day are literally just solutions to different problems, or enhanced, or, improvements to different problems or situations. So it was that simple for me.
No, you're absolutely right. That's what the basis of being a successful entrepreneur is. Solve somebody's problem, period. People will pay you for that. You graduate high school, get a job. I know you didn't go to college. Get a job. What was your next step?
After high school, I started to get a little bit older. So I had dibbled and dabbled in the streets, and I started to see, my uncle, my uncle was in Air Force. He's always in my ear, like, look, you don't want to go down this route. Why don't you check this out? You've always been smart. You've always learned fast. You've always been good at fixing things. Why don't you try the Air Force? I said, you're successful. I'd give it a shot. I definitely didn't want to go to college, so I said I'd give it a shot. And I signed up for the Air Force, and I ended up getting assigned to E&E, with the department's called E&E, which stands for Electrical and Environmental Systems for the F-16. So I ended up working on aircraft, which was, very different, but that was my job. So once I went into the Air Force, after tech school in Texas, I ended up with my first base station was in Las Vegas. And, when I was in Las Vegas, that's when I reconnected with my friends and cousins and just close family friends who I grew up with in St. Pete, who was also in Vegas. And he was in Vegas because he was getting the weed from Arizona to Vegas and then sending the Vegas back to Florida. But then he had a problem where he couldn't scale it. He didn't have an easy way of going from, 50 pounds of marijuana to 100 pounds of marijuana with him just being one person, basically flying back and forth and all that. So the wheels in my head started turning, and I said, okay, I left that stuff alone, but I feel like we can make this a lot more efficient. And, before we know it, we got so efficient, it eventually caught the federal government's attention, and, we were shipping thousands and thousands of pounds of marijuana from Nogales, Mexico, through Tucson, from Tucson to all over Florida, Sarasota, St. Petersburg, Tampa, Miami, etc.
Okay. This is where your story gets.
It got real big real quick.
Talk to me. How old were you when you joined the service?
I think I was 18.
You're 18-year-old. You're still a teenager.
Yep.
You get in the service. Somehow you get shipped out to Vegas. Yep. That's where you're stationed.
Yep.
You connect with a family member / good friend from the old hood.
Yep.
He's making money on the streets out there, but he doesn't necessarily know how to scale that marijuana business yet. This is what gets you to thinking. First and foremost, how long were you in the service before this happened?
Maybe maybe 6, 8 months, not that long.
Damn.
Not that long.
So, you're not even in the service a year.
Nah.
Okay.
Nah. And then I actually got out. I got out the service in 2 years, actually.
Okay, so you did 2 years of active duty.
Yep.
When you got out,
I started making so much money outside of it. By the second year, by going into my second year, I was making so much money outside of the service. I was like, I don't need this anymore. So I opted to get out early, and they let me.
okay.
Even though I got indicted, went to prison, I still have honorable discharge because I got out before I got indicted. So
Okay. So you're honorably discharged after 2 years. I want you to walk me through the scaling of this business. I want to understand how much, and first, was it only marijuana, or you also dealing in weight?
Yeah, so we dabbled, but then we realized that at that time, if you was able to scale marijuana, you could make the same money that you could make with cocaine without the legal risk.
Mm-hmm.
So, without starting at, 20, 30-year sentences, you can make that same money with marijuana if you was able to scale it. And the problem with marijuana is that it took a lot of space. It was very bulky and big. So it was very difficult to move a lot of that. The key is very small and compact. So it was easier if you're able to scale it. You can make the same amount of money and cut your risk by, 80% as far as legal risk is concerned.
Okay, so talk to me. How did you scale this business? How long did it take? How big did the operation get? How much money were you making?
Yeah, so it started out with just 5, 10 pounds at a time. And the big challenge, like I mentioned before, is that it's very bulky and it's very big. And the smell is very, very, very pungent and strong. So, the better the quality, the more stronger the smell, and it's very hard to pass that through undetected. So, back in those days, this was before TSA was a thing, and it was super hard to get stuff through the airport. These guys were flying back with it in their suitcases, wishing a prayer and just hoping to get through and stuff like that, right? So it was like that.
Is this before you came into the operation that they were flying?
Yeah, this is before me. Yeah.
This is before. Okay, great.
Yeah. So then it was just but then at 5, 10 pounds at a time, which street value on that was $5 to 10 grand around that time. It just wasn't practical to fly back and forth like that. It just wasn't practical. So, what ended up allowing us to scale it is one day I was in Bath and Body Works, and I forget what I was buying. Or no, not Bath and Body Works, Bed Bath and Beyond, like the home goods store. Mm-hmm. And I forget what I was there for, but I was walking through the aisles and I seen one of those vacuum seal packs where people was putting their comforters in to store it for the summer, and it basically sucks all the air out and keeps the dust out, it keeps the water out. So I looked at that, I was like, damn, this might solve my problem, right? Because before that, we would use detergent and saran wrap, and we would be spending all night wrapping these huge bales, and it would take hours to do, to get through 300 pounds. You're literally working 8 hours to get through that, because the amount of time it takes to wrap it up to try to just kill the smell. This was all just kill the smell so that you can get it through the postal system or the shipping system undetected. So long story short, a lot of, it started out with just doing it manually, putting dish detergent, putting black pepper to throw off the drug smelling dogs, and just all this stuff, this whole process to wrap these bales up to try to ship them to Florida. And then one day I stumbled across those vacuum seal bags, and I said, damn, let me try that. So I bought a box, took it home, I put one of the bales in it, I vacuumed it up, took me all of 5 minutes, and I threw it in my pool, and it stayed completely dry, and it had no smell. So then that's when it clicked, and I said, okay, now we're in business. And basically from that allowed us to scale from doing, 300 pounds, which is still a lot, to thousands in the same time period, the same month or so. So it just allowed us to scale significantly and it got to the point where, we knew a percentage, I knew if I sent 500 pounds, 30 or 40 of them is going to get stopped by the police, or either it's going to get stopped by the police, it's going to get stolen by someone who works in UPS, FedEx, or DHL, or it's going to get stolen by the person that works at the counter, where you deliver it. And then, so it would get stopped doing those three things. So all the disruptions wasn't always from law enforcement. It was a lot of times just people just stealing it. Or it was from employees stealing it. So, but we knew the percentage was going to be lost, which is translates to pretty much any business, any retail business, you're always going to have a percentage of loss. Yep. And we just knew what percentage of loss we was going to have. And then we just knew what scale we need to have. And because we had the vacuum seal process, it allowed us to quickly get huge bales sealed, packaged, no smell, no detection, 100% detection. And then the next problem was we ran out of places to ship it to. So when you're sending mail at that scale, you can't send a lot at one address because it starts looking suspicious. And then you start bringing attention on, you know, why are all these packages coming from Arizona or Vegas going to the same address all the time or every week? Because again, the bigger it gets, the more you have, right? So how we solved that is we started getting drivers on payroll. So we started getting UPS drivers on payroll, FedEx drivers on payroll, DHL drivers on payroll. And then all we had to do is get the zip code right to make sure that the box went on somebody that was on our payroll's truck. Once it got on their truck, it didn't matter what address. We could make up 100 different addresses. It didn't matter. As long as the zip code was right, it was going to get assigned to the particular truck. And we knew which zip codes to use to get it on the trucks that we wanted to get on. And then that's how the distribution kind of came together so that we was able to basically infinitely scale and get as much as we wanted because we had every piece of the supply chain was basically on our payroll.
Okay. What year are we talking?
This is 2004, 2005, 2006.
Okay, so you're in your early 20s at this point.
Yeah.
You're also...
I was indicted when I was 23 going on 24. So
okay, so you're very young.
This is all between 19 and 24. Everything I just described.
Got you. How difficult... Well, a couple of things stand out to me. You're shipping it. You go from, you know, your cousins and your friends flying small packages as much as they can carry to now you're shipping this. Mm-hmm. FedEx, UPS, DHL. You're in federal territory at this point.
Yeah, which I didn't know, but yeah.
How difficult was it to get some of those drivers on your team?
You'll be surprised what somebody who's making $40,000 would do, right? So, you know, if somebody's making $40,000 a year and you can turn that $40,000 a year to $100,000 a year, $150,000 a year, you'll be surprised. I mean, you know, the drivers that we had, I mean, those guys were, and this was funny, this is interesting because this led to the issues. But so the first problem is getting the drugs to where you want them to go. The next problem is getting the money back from where it is back to where it started. So that created its own challenges of getting money back because, again, you have the same issues. You have people stealing it, you have law enforcement confiscating it, and then you have to try to get it undetected, particularly when you have large volumes of small bills. So when you have, you know, $100,000 in 20s, 5s, 10s, and 50s, that's a big fucking, that's a lot of paper, so to speak, right? So it's a lot of space. So we had to come up with ways. So it turned out we would buy VCRs from Walmart, take all the guts out, fill the VCR so it's around the same weight, and then put them back in the boxes like they wasn't touched and then ship them so people look at it, the VCR, they pass it through. And then there's even times when it's last minute, I would fly to Tampa, you know, fly back with money. And that's when I learned that all the scanning systems that they have at the airport, even though they can see money, they never know the denomination. So they would see 100 grand, but they would say, oh, how much money is it? I'll say 10. And then most people, they don't know the difference. So I would have no problem flying through. And then, you know, so those were the two ways to get the money back. But then the other problem that money creates is when everyone starts making money, their habits change. And it's just inevitable. People's habits change. And when people's habits change, it's the beginning of the end. Your habits change, you get it in. So now you have guys who, you know, were driving to work at FedEx with, you know, their, you know, maybe a Lexus or a nice new model Explorer or something like that. You know, relatively, you know, $20,000, $30,000 car, and you know, then, you know, they pull up a few months later in brand new Porsche trucks with 24-inch rims on them and things like that. And people start asking questions like, hey, how we make the same thing? We work for the same business. How are you driving a Porsche truck? And I'm still in the same Honda Civic that you was driving, you know, a couple months ago. Something's different. And that was the beginning of the end.
Gotcha. Do you remember that fateful day when it all came crashing down?
Don't forget it.
Talk to me about that day. Everything is in. Before you even answer that, what type of money are we talking? You're talking a lot of marijuana.
At any given time, we was in the millions. At any given time, you know, transit-wise, there'll be 500 or so pounds going back and forth. So and each pound we would sell for about $1,000, and if we wanted to give it away, about $900. So, you know, you're talking about, you know, $500,000 transacting back and forth every few weeks. So, you know, we went through millions through that period of time. A percentage of that is lost, and a percentage that a lot of you take and you flip and keep going back and forth. And so, you know, it was just a lot of cash going back and forth.
Were you disciplined yourself? I know you said other people's habits changed. Did yours?
Yeah. So what's interesting is that my habits did change. So I became known in Vegas as this quiet guy that just was always in the clubs and just always had money and always but no one really knew where I lived. No, I didn't bring the attention to myself where people were close. People didn't really, I would just pop up and disappear. That's kind of.
But are you driving expensive cars? Are you moving with different women?
I owned businesses at the time. So I had a window tinting shop that I owned at the time. I had because the traffic got so much with shipping stuff, I bought a shipping store so that I could ship stuff from my own shipping store without having to worry about going to other stores. So a lot of the success, even my own family didn't know what I was doing. So everyone would attribute what they saw as what I was making from my businesses because I had 2 businesses running at the time.
Got you. Very smart. So you started your own shipping business.
Yeah. I mean, the volume got too big. We had to have our own.
Okay. Asked you earlier. Talk to me about that fateful day. Because it always, at some point, it always ends.
It does. And I think that's the problem with selling drugs is that you can never do 100% of it by yourself, right? Not if you're gonna make real money. So you always have to buy it from someone. You have to sell it to someone. And just those 2 interactions is enough to get you jammed up. Because you're talking to this person over here, and you don't know what they have going on 100%. You got to deal with this person over there, you don't know what they have going on 100%. That's enough to break the whole chain because you don't know which one's going to be the weak link in the chain. And that's essentially what happened just on a larger scale. So, you know, how it started is 2 key things happened. Our Connect's driver, again, ties to money, felt like he wasn't making as much money as he should. So he started doing side deals and dealing with another group outside of who my Connect knew and who we knew. Because my Connect, we was really, really, really close. And we was making so much money together, we didn't want to do business with anyone else. I didn't want to do business with anyone else. He didn't want to do business with anyone else. And that was our way of protecting ourselves, right? So that was part of the strategy, which worked for a while. However, he wasn't paying all the people on his team well, right? I don't know how he's paying them. It's none of my business. But he's not taking care of his team, and his team wants to eat a little bit more. So his team now starts striking side deals on the side. So when his driver starts doing side deals on the side, that driver gets jammed up on a bad deal. So the first person that driver tells on is the Connect, right? Now this all happens simultaneously, so that's step 1. The second thing is one of the UPS drivers I mentioned earlier who was going to work in a Porsche truck. They start questioning him. They put the pressure on him. Like, yo, what the fuck are you doing? They start following him on his routes. They get him on tape, taking boxes off his truck, ripping the labels off and handing them to unknown people, right? Not delivering, right? Which is what we would do. So they put him in the room and jam him up. So now in Arizona so you have ICE, which Immigration Customs Enforcement in Arizona. Then you have DEA in Florida. And they both now have cases open for these 2 individuals, but they don't know they're connected yet. So as they start connecting the dots, then it turns into a joint task force with ICE was on my case, DEA was on my case, Pinellas County Sheriff's Department was on my case, and Las Vegas Metro Police Department was on my case. They all came together and they realized that, okay, this is the same group. The driver here is getting the weed is coming from the driver from the West Coast, and then the West Coast is connected to this other arrest that we made earlier this month, right? So once that connection was made, they started just watching. They was able to figure out everyone on the Florida side, but no one could find me because, you know, I didn't have my house in my name. I lived super, 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 super low key, right? So they wasn't able to tie where it was coming from Vegas, because I would send it to random addresses, and then I would tell people where to be and when to be there at the last minute. I didn't even give people information ahead of time, right? So it was very a last minute thing, because I did it on purpose. I just didn't want to float around, et cetera. And it gave me some level of control too, if I need to switch stuff up. So one day, you know, my boy D, you know, was super close, and we was basically partners in all of this. He would call me every morning because I had just sent a package of money down there that had came from up here. So I just sent a package, I don't know, it was like maybe $100, $150, something like that. And I didn't hear nothing back, which is unlike him. Like, he's super on point, and we was doing this for some years, and we never missed one of our check-in calls. And we always rotate our burner phones and stuff like that. And I couldn't get a hold of him. And that's how I started feeling weird. I was like, damn, it's weird that I'm not hearing from him. I said, okay, cool. I'm not gonna stress out about it. I go to my mail store. I said, you know, my normal routine, I go to my mail store, and I'm actually going to the mail store to ship out. I have like maybe 50 or 60 pounds in the trunk that I didn't ship out the day before, that's still in my trunk that I'm gonna ship out that day. So I get to the mail store, I get out, and I start talking to my girlfriend who was already there. And just because I'm running my mouth, I didn't take the boxes out, so it's still in my trunk. And while we're talking, it's like a glass storefront. From both sides, you see all these windbreakers just walking through, and then they come into the door, right? So it's like 20 people.
So you're on the phone talking to your girl at this point.
Yeah.
This is so surreal, because I could just imagine looking through this glass window. At what point are you saying to yourself, damn.
Yeah, then it clicked. I was like,
happening.
You know, at the time, I realized that I have a very high tolerance for risk. So even then, I always felt like I could talk my way out of this, right? Like, you know what I'm saying? So I still feel like that, right? So I'm like, I'm thinking about what I'm going to say. I'm thinking about what I'm trying to preempt and try to figure out what they know, so I can try to see how I'm going to respond, right? So that's what my brain is doing. Like, okay, trying to preempt. So they come in, and this actually wasn't where I got arrested. This is actually where they did the search warrant. So they came in and they said, you know, we have a search warrant to search the place, blah, blah, blah. The head investigator, cocky white guy, he came, he was young, he's probably my age, a little bit older than me, probably about 5-6 years older than me. And he was like, he took some handcuffs, he waved it in front of me. He was like, yeah, you got to pay these in your future. So then they searched my mail store. They couldn't find nothing, because again, I was very disciplined in how I did things. And what I'm thinking is like, fuck, the weed is in my trunk. I hope they don't have a search warrant for my car. Luckily, they're doing all the searching. They're annoyed. They spent all day here. So you had ICE flew in from Miami. DEA flew in from Florida. Pinellas County Sheriffs flew in from Tampa. And then they met up with Las Vegas Metro PD here. And they was, you know, that was their task force, and they was doing their search and all that stuff. And a judge in Tampa had sent the warrant to a judge in Vegas for the judge in Vegas to sign the warrant so they can do the search warrant in my business. So luckily, the judge that issued the search warrant in Tampa, the federal judge that issued the search warrant in Tampa, by the time they got done searching and looking for stuff and couldn't find anything, it was like 3 o'clock Pacific time, which means it was 6 o'clock East Coast time. So it's like, one of them said, we didn't search his car. So they came to me and said, you know, do we have permission to search your car? And I said, does your warrant give you permission to search my car? He's like, oh, you're a little smart ass? Call the judge. So they tried to get the judge on the phone, the judge goes. So they couldn't get a hold of the judge, right? So they couldn't get the judge on the phone. So I was like, fuck, I got saved, right? Because now I'm nervous. I'm like, so I'm in the whole time, they came in like around 11. They didn't get done till like 3. This whole time they had me handcuffed, and I'm sitting, you know, in the customer area, and I'm trying not to look at my vehicle. So I'm positioning my body, because I don't even want them to see me looking at it to even get in the car. And what's funny is that while they were, mad and frustrated about not finding what they was looking for or finding anything that was going to be like the nail in the coffin, because at this point, what I later learned, they only had a conspiracy case, right? They had people saying they was doing things, but they never really caught me doing anything. They never caught none of my co-defendants doing anything. It was just a conspiracy case at this point. So what was interesting is that while they was doing their smoke breaks, they're literally leaning on the car that has everything that they're looking for is literally on the car that they're leaning on, right? Through their smoke breaks. And I'm like, fuck. So they do the search warrant. After that, I retain a lawyer. And then I know, okay, now I know the investigation is focused on me, right? Before I was an anonymous, whatever, they don't know where it's coming from. Now I knew that they had narrowed those two things together for me. And then about maybe 6 months later, that's when I was indicted and taken to the courthouse.
Wow, that's one hell of a story right there. You get taken to the courthouse.
Yeah.
What are your charges?
So they charged me conspiracy to distribute 3,000 to 8,000 pounds of marijuana.
So that's your charges.
Conspiracy case, and they did compensate some, but they wasn't able to figure out exactly how much. So basically, they just calculated based on what they had in the time. They did an estimate of what they thought transpired.
Did you say 3,000 to 8,000?
Yeah.
Excuse me, I'm sorry.
Yes, 3,000 to 8,000.
Okay. You sound like you're obviously extremely intelligent, even as a young man. Did you put money to the side for a rainy day? At the time that they raid your place, they're on me. It's only a matter of time. So I got a question even before I ask you that. Did you stay in the game at that point, or did you wash your hands and say, look, I got money in the bank, let me keep it moving?
Of course not. I was young. I stayed in the game. I didn't stop.
Oh, my God. Okay.
Because, and to my defense, to my younger, immature self, I, didn't understand federal law. 2, I didn't understand conspiracy. I thought I had to be caught doing something. And 3, I downplayed the significance of weed, because normal circumstances, weed isn't significant. It just gets really significant when you're talking about thousands and thousands of pounds.
Exactly.
Then it's a whole different thing, but I didn't make that connection, then, right? So I'm like, oh, it's just weed, whatever. And then 2, when you've been doing something for so long, whether it's illegal or not, once something becomes normal to you, it really becomes normal. So for me, it's just like whatever, right? So since even after that, I had flew to Tampa, and I had, brought money with me and all that kind of stuff. So, I wasn't reckless, but at the same time, it was just like, oh, the way I looked at it is, damn, they tried to catch me, they didn't find nothing, I'm good. That's how I look at it.
Oh, my goodness. This is a very common story. But did you put money away for a rainy day? Was you able to have that money on hand for a paid lawyer?
Yeah. So I hired a lawyer, and then they gave me a bond of $50,000. But the thing with federal bonds is you can't use the bail bonds. You have to put up the entire 50 in cash, the whole thing up. So and then I was able to post bond, because when they indicted me, part of the game that they play is that they wanna motivate you, is the word I'll use, to get you to talk by the time they get you where they want you to be at. Mm-hmm. So what they do is that they call it in the system, they call it diesel therapy. So when they indicted me in Vegas, usually if they really want to if it's a white collar crime, they'll get you from Vegas to Florida. They'll put you on Con Air, which is a real thing, and they'll fly you to whatever state you got to be in, and they'll handle it. For me, they gave me the long route. So they put me on a bus from Vegas to California, and then from California on a plane to Oklahoma. And basically I stopped damn near at every county jail between Oklahoma and Tampa. So by the time they get you there, like, you done lost 50, 60 pounds. You sleeping in these cells. You around a whole bunch of crazy motherfuckers. You by the time you just, like, your brain is so fucked up. You don't know what day you're coming or going. Like, you're disorientated. It's crazy, especially if you've never been in prison before. This is just like pure culture shock. So their trick was, they told the judge I was a flight risk. So that's how they was get the judge to revoke and not give me a bond. So basically, I would have had to stay in jail the whole time. But once I got to Florida, They then, all my by the time I got to Florida, because it took me so long, all my co-defendants had already copped out and just pleaded guilty. So by the time I got there, I just pleaded guilty, and they said, okay, he's not flight risk no more, and they sent me my sentencing date.
How much time did you get?
51 months.
Okay, I'm not great with math.
Right under 5 years. Right under 5 years.
Okay.
In federal time in months. That's all.
You're right under 5 months. You go into the system. It's your first time ever in the system.
Yeah.
Talk to me, and you're in the feds, correct?
Yeah.
Talk to me, number one, how did you not, or did you, get involved in the whole prison culture? Or did you immediately look at it like, look, you know, I'm here, I got 5 years. I could have done much longer. I need to make this time work for me. Like, what was your mindset at 23, 24 years old entering that system?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a level that everyone is going to be in a prison culture when you're in prison. Like, there's a level that, you know, it's like a 100% opt-in type of situation. So, you know, that is a part of it, but you don't have to make it, what's the word? You don't have to get to the point in it that you make that your career. You can kind of still stay in your own lane. And there's some guys where they ain't coming home. So they have a different mentality and different mindset than somebody who has 5 years or 10 years or 15 years. So, you know, when I say like there's some level that you have to opt in, for example, prison politics, like there's no, whether you have 60 days or whether you have a life sentences, we're all in the prison politics, particularly on the West Coast. So all the blacks stay with the blacks eat at certain tables, you don't associate with no snitches, you don't associate with child molesters, you don't associate with any other races, you don't owe debts to other races. If one black has an issue, all blacks have an issue. Like there's no question about that. You have to, that's just how it's run in there, right? So that's the politics side. But then it can go above and beyond that. If, you know, there's guys in there where they doing the same shit as on the street, hustling, doing the same stuff in the street, whether getting contraband in and all other kind of stuff. You don't have to go that far with it, right? You kind of stay out of that and just stay in your lane and do your thing that way. So I was more the latter. Well, part of prison politics that we had riots, and the blacks riot, you ride with the blacks, period. Doesn't matter who did it or why they did it, we all ride together. That's just how it is. So that happened several times. But as far as getting involved in, you know, the drugs and the other contraband and stuff like that, you'd be like, nah, I'm cool on that, right? So, and that's fine. So that's really how I did my time. And I really focused my time to, you know, get healthy, and, you know, mind, body, and spirit. And I read a lot. I consumed a lot of information. I read anything I could get my hands on. And I did every day planning for my day out. This is how I did my time. And it was the only thing that kept me from going crazy, because I remember when I first got in, like I couldn't even fathom, because when you're 22, 23, you're not thinking 5 years out or what your life is looking like 5 years out. I knew I wasn't. So when you're there and they say, you're not going to leave this environment until this date, and you're looking forward, you can't even fathom, like, what date is this? So it's just hard to wrap your brain around that, particularly when you're young, and particularly when you're used to living life on your own terms, to be in a situation where you are not in control. You're not in control when the lights turn on. You're not in control when the lights turn off. You're not even in control of when you're fed. You're not in control of when you can shower. So it's just in a very different environment that you have to adjust to. But what I will say, what I did learn, is that I respect the human's ability to adjust to any situation that you're in. Yep. As crazy as it sounds, when you think about something, and a lot of times, a lot of that fear may prevent us from exploring and going out on new things, or trying things, or taking certain risks. Not necessarily legal risks, but even starting a business or leaving your comfortable job or whatever. Don't underestimate your ability to adjust, because you will adjust. And then you'll look back and be like, oh, I don't even know why this was such a roadblock for me in the first place. Because I think that's probably one of our greatest superpowers as people, particularly Black people, is that we have an uncanny ability to adjust to pretty much any situation or circumstances that we're in. And in most cases, we can thrive in it.
We as human beings, definitely as Black people, we will adjust, we will adapt. It does not matter what situation you are in. as uncomfortable as it may seem. Give yourself a level of time, a period of time rather, and you will adapt to whatever situation you're in. So that is so true. And it's such a great gem that you pointed out, because there's entrepreneurs right now afraid to take that leap, bet on themselves, because they might have a great idea, but they don't necessarily know the industry that much. And they're afraid, thinking that I'm never going to learn it. And what they don't know is most successful entrepreneurs, you kind of are building the plane as it's flying.
Yeah, 100%.
It's just what comes with this territory. How long were you on the inside before you identified the problem, which would eventually spark the idea for your business?
Yeah, so one of the things I used to do to pass the time is I would lay on my bunk and just brainstorm and daydream about different ideas or different things that I could possibly do when I was out. And then when I would settle on something that I like, I would just jot it down. And then I would get super detailed because, again, I have time. So I would draw out, basically make my business plan, how much I'm going to sell it. I would get into the details of like pricing, how much I want to sell it for, how many employees I'm going to hire, how much square foot of a building I need. And some of these things I didn't know the answer, but I would make assumptions. But going through this mental exercise, basically building businesses in my mind from start to finish, just gave me a lot of exercise so that when I was released and I actually did it in the real world, it didn't feel like the same. It didn't feel like the first time. It felt like I had been rehearsing this over and over and over again, because that was like one of my outlets, right? So, just noticing, and I would just walk around the compound and I would see people complain about their mail or lack of mail or lack of communication or expensive for the phone calls. And I would just jot that down. So, hey, if I was going to solve this problem, what would I do? And then go through that whole exercise. I would see people complain about, their family members having issues with finding housing and real estate. And I said, okay, if I was going to solve this problem, how would I solve it? And then I would just do that over and over again. I would meet somebody. You would bump, particularly in federal prison, you have a whole gambit of inmates, right? So it's not just dudes on the street. Like, you have dudes from Wall Street, you have politicians, you have, Fortune 500 company CEOs, you have the whole gambit in federal prisons, right? So also I would talk to a lot of different people and I would hear a lot of things, and it would get the wheels turning and you will learn. So basically I just turned my environment into somewhere for me to learn. And prison is like that for most people. Like, most people I know, they're learning something. So it's either you're gonna sharpen your skills and you're gonna come out and be a better criminal, or you're gonna sharpen your skills, you're gonna come out and learn something else. So there's guys I know guys that went in, came out, certified electricians, certified plumbers, CDL licenses, they certified barbers, so I've seen people come in and do one of those two things. Mm-hmm. And just because there's a wealth of information that people have in there, people learn how to fix their credit. I mean, the culture in prison, part of the prison culture is people who have information, part of how they'll do their bid and how they get their time passed is that they'll teach information. So if I was a mortgage broker and I understand credit, I'll teach people how credit works. Or if I was a CEO of a Fortune 500 company and I did tax evasion or some shit like that, I'll teach people how to use Excel. And it was things like that people were spending time, and a lot of brothers was learning. A lot of brothers was really getting good information, and a lot of people that I knew that all out now, they're all doing well, and they've learned something. From trading to just all across the board, people was just learning stuff. So that's really how I spent my time. And I aligned myself with people who also spent their time that way and wasn't just, watching TV or gambling or, running cigarettes or weed or whatever. I just aligned myself with the people that was on that, and, everyone is out doing their thing.
Okay. I want you now, you get out. I want you to go a little bit into detail.
Yeah.
The problem. You kind of touched on it, the problem that you found that inmates were having on the inside. I want you to go a little bit deeper into what the problem was, and when you got out, how did you get to work on the solution?
Yeah, so the main problem that I noticed is that even in my personal experience, it was always a hassle for someone to write a letter because people on the outside, they're moving at the speed of light. Their mode of communication is texting and phone calls, emails. They're not handwriting a letter. They don't have a time. A lot of times, you know, they're trying to take care of the household. The person that was the main breadwinner in the household, they're the one that's in prison. So they have more responsibilities. They're stressed out. They don't have time to do that. And or on the phone systems, it was always super expensive to make the phones. So it was always a financial issue and it was a convenience and time issue. So, you know, I knew that someone could make an app that would make it easy for people just to be able to upload photos, have it printed and shipped. I mean, Snapfish was a thing, Shutterfly was a thing. There was companies out there that did this. No one just focused on this demographic. And also no one really understood the needs of the demographic to make sure, for example, that the envelopes or the letters and all the stuff is done a certain way so that it doesn't pose a security risk. No one just focused on this demographic, right? To build a product that was specifically for this demographic. So, so when I got out, that's the thing that I said, you know what, I'm going to solve that problem. I had all these ideas. And I said, you know what, this is the one that I feel like is the most tangible. This is the one that I can relate to the most. I'm going to pursue this. And that's what I pursued. So my ambitions in the very beginning was I just wanted a place where people can go on a website, they can upload a photo, they hit the send button. I thought I was going to have a printer in the office that was going to print it and ship it and send it out. I didn't realize, I wasn't thinking about scale. I wasn't thinking about how big it would get. I wasn't thinking about those things. I was trying to think of the smallest components to be able to validate that my idea was real and to validate that people would pay for this if they had it. So because I was in a halfway house at the time, so in federal prison, once you're released, they send you to a halfway house. Which
what year were you released?
2011.
How old are you at the time?
28? Yeah, okay. 28.
28 years old, 2011, you get out, you go into the halfway house. Take it from here.
Yeah, so get to the halfway house, and the rules at the halfway house is that you can only leave if you have a job. And then you can only leave, so if you have a job, you only leave, for the hours that you work, and you only can leave for a limited amount of hours. I think they give you like 2-3 hours a day to look for a job. Mm-hmm. They don't allow you to have a cell phone, and then at night you're still locked in a dorm. It's like a dorm area with like 6 beds, and you're locked in that dorm area. They give you lunch and dinner every day, and breakfast you figure it out. So that's basically what the program that I was put in once my sentence was done. And this is like true for any federal inmate. That's just how they do it. They want to get you in the community before they just throw you out the gates. So long story short, because I wanted to work on my business, I had to figure out how to hustle and get myself out the damn halfway house so I can work on it. So I got my co-founder Alfonso, and I had him say he was hiring me on paper. And one of the things that they do and how the business model for the halfway houses work is if you're working, I think it's like 20% or 30% of whatever your check is, you have to pay to the halfway house. So you have to give them a pay stub, and then you have to give them a check, a money order for 30% of whatever it is of that. So what I would do is I would have him make fake pay stubs, and I would just get money orders for the 30% of what I said I was getting paid. And then I would do that. And that's how I was able to buy my way out the halfway house so I could work on the business every day. So I was in halfway house for 6 months. So basically during those 6 months, I went from getting released to getting the product built and getting our customers in that 6-month period. And why I was rushing in that 6 months is because I knew I had 6 months of not having any rent. I knew I had 6 months where I don't have to buy lunch or dinner. And to me, that halfway house was really my accelerator. It was like my incubator to really get the business off the ground while I didn't have a lot of the burdens that I would have had I had to say, well, damn, I got to find someplace to live. I got to pay rent. I got to do that. So I knew I needed to get something popping in that 6-month time period. So my strategy was I went online, I started Googling. Again, I didn't have no background in technology. I'd never done that technology before. And I started Googling, and I found this website called Freelancer, and it said you can hire developers to do anything. So I went on there and I said, hey, this is what I'm trying to build. And I had a bunch of people respond. I went with the cheapest person. And it was a lady in Texas. And she was like, yeah, I can help you do this. So I said, cool. And then I just went to friends and family, the people who knew me from the streets, and they just always believed. They knew that if I said I was going to do something, I was going to figure out it was going to be big. So I would get $500 here, $1,000 here, $800 here. And that's how I would pay this freelancer to get our first early version of Pigeonly built. And then once we got there, then the rest is history.
Okay. In 6 months' time, you're telling me you get out of prison, you're in a halfway house. You can only go out of the halfway house for a certain amount of hours per day. You use this time so wisely that you were able to create the first iteration of Pigeonly within 6 months?
Yeah. It was a rush thing. I mean, I just had a sense of urgency.
I'm asking you this because there are people who have never been to prison. There are people with nothing but time on their hand and can't get their businesses up and running in 6 months. So your level of determination is fascinating to me. The way that you were able to use every second of every hour of every day to your benefit, coming out of the system, I just find that remarkable, and I got to give it up to you because there are free people who have been talking about an idea, and you speak to them a year later, 2 years later, 3 years later, and they barely even got an incorporation at this point. So your first iteration of Pigeon, and before we move forward, Pigeonly, where'd the name come from?
From messenger pigeon, carrier pigeons.
Okay. First iteration of Pigeonly. Is it strictly focused on photos?
Yeah. So strictly focused on photos. It wasn't pretty. It didn't have a bunch of features, but it worked. It did one thing right. You can upload a photo, and then actually, when I started doing research of how I was going to print the photos, I stumbled across this website because I was looking for photo printers, and I stumbled across this website. First, I thought I was going to buy something in Best Buy. Then I was like, I don't know if that's going to work. That's going to make sense. Then I came across this other company in California, and they was like, oh, this is what we do. Now, this is when there was like a big push on photo apps back then, where everybody had a photo app, and people was printing and shipping photos. And they said, basically, you can tie into us, and we can print and ship it. I was like, okay, perfect. So they became our fulfillment center. I told them my story. I won them over, and I pitched them on an idea enough for them to want to be my partner in it. So then I was able to integrate with them with no cost. And then they said, well, we're going to charge you, I don't remember what it was, I think 20 cents per photo or something like that, for every photo they printed for us. So I could just say, okay, I'm going to upsell it, I'm going to sell it for 50 cents. And that was a very basic early version. And then we ran into a marketing problem where we had the product built, and it was like, okay, now how are we going to get the words out? How are we going to get the word out about it? And what we didn't have is the resources to do like Google ads and big marketing pushes and things like that. That stuff can get really expensive really fast. So what I did was I just took what I knew about the system. I knew that everyone in prison is public record. All that information is publicly available. So I said, why don't we build, I went back to the developer. I said, look, here's a database and a public record database that has every person that's in jail. I need you to do something to get their name and address for me in a list so we can mail to that list. She said, oh yeah, we can do it. That's called a web scraper. It's easy. We'll write it up. Perfect. Let me get that. So she did it. She built it. And then we used that list that we had and we created our mailing list. And then what we would do is we would send greeting cards to everybody on that mailing list to say, hey, there's this new app that's supposed to help you get photos from your loved ones on the outside. Tell your family members to go to this website and try this new service, blah, blah, blah. That was our marketing. And when we sent it out, we just had a bunch of people start showing up at the website. It just started going viral. And that's how we got our first.
That first 500 postcards that you send to the inmates receive them and actually respond.
Yeah. So what the inmates would do is once they would get it, they would reach out to their girl, they would reach out to their mama, their baby mama, their uncle, whoever, and say, yo, now you have an easy way and stop giving me excuses to finally get the pictures I've been begging you for all this time. Go to this website, it's only 50 cents. And people did it.
I love your story. So I want to take a second because I want to pull out some gems. Again, if you are an entrepreneur in business, if you are an aspiring entrepreneur, listen to this man's story. He's out for less than a year. He figures out a way to get the most basic the most basic iterations of his idea up and running. You don't have to know it all, but you have to get started.
Yeah.
I want to say that again. Entrepreneurs and wannabe entrepreneurs, they spend too much time thinking. You overthink yourself right out of an opportunity. Just get started. The rest, like you said earlier, Fred, most entrepreneurs have an accelerated rate at which we learn. If you're a true entrepreneur, you're gonna figure this thing out. But you can't figure something out writing down everything in a notepad. It has to come to a time where you put practical application and start problem solving. So I love the fact that you got started, you got your business up and running. And one last thing I want to point out is the figure it out part. You had this iteration of your idea, you have the app, you know it's an idea that could work, but you're stuck. I don't have money for Google Ads. I don't have money for Facebook. What do I do? Again, comes down to problem solving.
Yep.
Public records. It's simple as that. It's not the most ingenious thing in the world. It's not high tech. I send postcards to my target demographic, and you saw right off the bat that this idea that you conceived while you were locked up, there was a real need for it. The inmates responded by speaking to their loved ones, and you're off to the races. Love that story. First iteration of Pigeonly are pictures.
Yep.
At what point did this business start to scale? Because I know it has since grown. It's an all-in-one service at this point. It's phone calls. Loved ones can send articles, greeting cards. There's so much that if you need to get in contact with your loved one, this is an extremely inexpensive one-stop shop for you to do so. Where did you get the money to start building these other layers of your company? And how soon did you start?
So how it worked out is, once we got that first version out, that carried us another, let's say 12 months. And it was making enough money for us to cover our costs. But then as it started getting bigger, we started realizing that we needed more money to grow, to be able to invest in things, to hire a team full time, that just the consultant / hired gun of a programmer just to fix certain things that wasn't going to work to be able to scale and grow a business. So what ended up happening is I was at home one day and I saw this TV special. It was Soledad O'Brien. She used to do a special called Black in America, and this episode from CNN, yeah.
Yep.
And she used to do a thing called Black in America, and this episode was on the Silicon Valley. And I was fascinated when I saw that there was Black people that went to this area called Silicon Valley, which is the first time I ever heard of it. And they were going out to San Francisco and the Bay Area, and they had these tech ideas, and investors was writing them checks. I'm like, what? So I'm like, well, I feel like what we have is in LA. Like, people use our service online. Like, we're not selling computers or nothing, but I feel like we tech enough. So I started Googling accelerators, because that's one thing they were focused on talking about, is the role accelerators play in helping entrepreneurs get.
Stop there for a second. Everybody who watches this is not going to be familiar with that terminology. What is an accelerator?
I'll explain it. So they talked about accelerators, which basically is a program, usually it's like a 6-week or 12-week program, where they will basically have a cohort or a class of founders, and they will work with the founders to help them figure out their pitch, help them figure out their product market fit, help them get introduced to investors so they can raise capital, help them figure out their marketing plan. And basically the goal is, at the end, of this condensed time period of 6 or 12 weeks, that you will be significantly further along because they've compact a lot of information and resources that you typically would not have. And most of it is driven by mentorship. Like that's the core tenet of the model, is saying we're going to pair an entrepreneur with a mentor that has been where they are and can tell them the fastest path to go where they want to go. So that's the main thing. So back then there was tons of accelerators. Every city had an accelerator because they were like popular. Like you had Y Combinator, which is actually the 800-pound gorilla. Then you have like 500 startups, and then the list goes on and on. Techstars, those are like the big three. And then you then at that time, every city, every area was just creating their own quote unquote accelerator because it was just very hot. That was like when everyone was talking about innovation and tech and all this kind of stuff. And it's not the case now, where it's not as many as there were before. But then there was. So then I just went through Google, and I would Google technology accelerator, and everyone that popped up, every single one I would apply at. And if you haven't done an accelerator application, these things are like encyclopedia books, right? They're so long and so detailed and so much answers. So this was a very long and tedious process, but I literally applied to every single one that had an application online. Some of them, and a lot of times they'll do them at certain times. They'll have like a summer class or winter class. So sometimes you have to wait. And did you miss the window? Did you catch the window? So anyway, I did this. All of them turned me down. All of them said, nope, 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 nope. All I got was denial letters from every last one of them.
Do they tell you why?
Say that again?
Do they tell you why?
Sometimes, a lot of times it wasn't very specific. A lot of times it was very generic, wish you luck on your idea. This doesn't mean your idea is not good, but we just went with other candidates. It's that type of response. So eventually there was this one accelerator that said yes, and it was called the New Me Accelerator, and it was the same one that was on the CNN special. And what made New Me a unique accelerator is that they only focused on founders, Black and brown founders, right? That was their focus, is to try to introduce more Black and brown founders to technology.
I want you to say that name again.
Newme.
Got you. And one last question before you move the story. I'm sorry?
They're still around now.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that. I'm sorry?
They're still around now.
Okay. One last question before we move the interview along. On the actual applications, does it ask that question that seems to stifle so many of the people in our community? I know you said it's like an encyclopedia.
It doesn't ask that question.
It does?
Incarcerated before, yes or no? It doesn't ask that. However, what will come up is they would ask the question, what is your idea? The follow-up question to that is, how did you get this idea? Or what led you to get this idea? What did you experience? Because they're trying to validate, why are you the right person to solve this problem? And what do you have? So I ended up having to say it. In the early days, I really wasn't 100% sure on how much I wanted to disclose my personal background. And then I ended up getting connected through New Me. I ended up getting connected with our lawyer, who's still our lawyer today, Carlos Elgerby. And what makes a good lawyer, by the way, when you're evaluating legal representation for your business, is a lawyer that takes the time to teach you what's going on in the process. So not just someone that says, here's your funding docs, the one that teaches you how to read and understand your funding docs for yourself. That separates a good attorney from someone who's just going to collect his billable hours. Because now a lot of things I can handle and understand myself, I know how to deal with without picking up the phone, because he spent so much time teaching me how to go through things and how to think through certain things, that now I'm good enough to be dangerous on most corporate legal issues, just because I had a really good attorney that took the time to teach me. And then a lot of attorneys, they just won't. They won't take that time, or if they're just gonna collect their billable rate or whatever, and they're just gonna go on with it. So that's just an aside. But one of the things he told me was, he said, look, it is what it is. And if this prevents someone from wanting to do business with you, the sooner you know that, the less time you're going to waste. And I said, you know what, you're right. So then I just owned it. He said, another thing, when you own your story, you control it. Because if you don't own your story, somebody else is going to own your story. They're going to tell it for you. And who knows how they're going to tell it, right? So then that's when I got comfortable with owning my own story. And it's, I haven't looked back since.
I recently had somebody on the show who was another African-American brother who went to Silicon Valley. Maybe you've heard of him, Shawn, and he started, Maven. He did really well out there. I gotta believe, based on the statistics, there's less than 1% of Black and brown people.
We all know each other.
Yeah, that are even out there. Yeah. How do you share your story with a potential investor that, number one, is not even used to Black and brown people sitting in front of them, definitely probably has never ever invested in one of their companies or ideas, and you are talking about a population that most people, they don't even want to think about. Like lock them up. I feel safer with them in there. I don't have to think about them. How did you translate this idea? What was your pitch when you're sitting in front of people who, just truth be told, don't want to think about inmates, and you're an ex-con yourself?
Yeah. I think the big thing that I point out, one of the things that I always tell people, particularly when I'm going into a room, is look, at the end of the day, I already know I'm gonna split the room between people who feel like the criminal justice system is broken and people who feel like lock them up, throw away the key, I don't want them out here anyway, right? So you're gonna split it. But the reality is, regardless of which side of that fence you fall on, the reality is that 95, 98% of people don't have life sentences, which means at some point in time, they're gonna be in society with you. So you really need to think about, what kind of person do you want to release? That's the question. Do you want to release someone who has been ostracized and has no family ties and no home to go to? Or do you want to release someone who has strong family ties and has the highest probability of success to be a productive member of society? Because again, when they come home, they're going to be with you. So that's the real question. So regardless of how you feel about it, you can feel any way you want to feel about it. But at the end of the day is, you have to think about what's more important is, what type of person do you want to release when that date comes, because that date is going to come. And I think that helped a lot of people look at it from a different, impartial way. And I think in addition to that, when I'm talking about it, it's not, before I get into like a lot of populations, I'm mainly focusing on the business and the numbers. And that's like a universal language when you're talking to investors, right? So it doesn't matter, whether you like me or don't like me. One thing's for sure is that numbers are always going to tell the truth. And if I could show you and clearly articulate how we went from this growth rate to that growth rate, if I can clearly articulate how my customer acquisition is this cost versus that cost, and profit's going to be this versus that, it tells a very clear story that you can get over the hump. Okay, this is a real business. Now I just have to get over the mission of the business and the market of the business and see if I'm on board with that. And that's a separate evaluation. But as far as the business side evaluation, a lot of times it's given the background, at least for me, it was given the background so people understood the market, understood the problems in the market. They'd be like, oh, inmates don't have cell phones? Well, of course you would think that, but no, inmates don't have cell phones. So it's that type of thing. And then once you understand that, then you say, oh, I didn't know prison phone calls can be $15 for 15 minutes. How can anyone pay for that? How can anyone afford that? Well, that's why we're here. So then it makes that conversation a little bit easier. And then everyone's not gonna rock with you. So, when we raised our first $1 million, I probably talked to maybe about 60 or 70 investors. Our first $1 million came from 6 people. So that gives you an idea of the ratio. So you have to be okay with people telling you no, and you have to be okay with people saying, no, I'm not interested for whatever reason they have. And you also have to be brave enough to ask them specifically, what is the reason, right? Because what that does is that allows you to understand how your pitch is coming across. It allows you to understand how you're communicating it. It allows you to understand if you do a better job. It helps you understand, are there any holes in your pitch? Did you cover everything that you should cover? Because investors hear so many things pitched at them all the time. You get 3 minutes, maybe if you're lucky. And within those 3 minutes, you have to get them not to say, here's a check. You have to be able to get them to say, I want to learn more. If they want to learn more in those 3 minutes, then you have a higher probability of when they do more digging in, get to know you and get to know spend more time with the business, then you get to the check. But in the beginning, you just want someone to get to the point where they want to give you more of their limited time to learn more about your business, because they have to look at, 100 companies in a given time period, right? So that's really what your goal is. And a lot of times I see people, they go too hard trying to get the check on that first meeting, and that's not how this works. Like, it's just not. It's really, is really a series of building confidence, particularly seeing in an early stage when you're in the seed stage, letting investors see you going from point A to point B, from point B to point C, and so on. They're seeing that you make progress. And the more they see that, the more they're going to be interested that not necessarily betting on the business, but betting on you as a founder. Because when you're early stage, the business can go either way. And you can pivot, you can change directions, you can switch your product out. Your early money does not come to you because of your business. Your early money comes based off their confidence in you as an entrepreneur, not necessarily your business.
How much money were you guys making in that early stage when you first began pitching in Silicon Valley?
We was doing something small, like maybe 50,000 or 60,000. It wasn't significant at all. It was small.
Are we talking 50,000 a year?
Yeah. Run rate. So, but you look at it as annual run rate. So if I started my business today and I meet you tomorrow and I make $1 a month, my annual run rate would be $12. Because you'll say, if you keep making $1 a month, by the end of the year, you're gonna have $12. Mm-hmm. So at the time when we met the investors, we had an annual run rate. Well, based on what we was making a month, the assumption would be, okay, you guys will make 30,000 for the year. And we knew what it would cost for us to acquire a customer. So then the wheels start turning head. Okay, well, if it only costs you $1 to buy a customer and a customer pays you this, then if you have more dollars, you can buy more customers and your annual run rate will go from 30,000 to 100,000, from 100,000 to 500,000, from 500,000 to a million, and so on. And that's how it happened.
Who were some of your early investors? I know you said you raised $1 million with your first round of raising money. Who was? Yeah. Would we know some of these early investors? Were any of them brothers or sisters that invested in you?
Yeah. So you might. Eric Moore from Base Ventures, a brother from Oakland. No, Richmond actually, but he's based in Oakland. Cool dude. Also, Shante Spencer, he played on the 49ers and the Raiders. Super dude. We talk almost daily to this day. Who else? Mitch Kapor from Kapor Capital. He's a well-known impact investor. One of his claim to fame is that if you use Excel, he was basically the creator of the first version of Excel, which is called Lotus, but then turned into Microsoft Excel. So that was his claim to fame. Those are probably the main people that are most notable, I would say. And then later we end up getting investments from Laureen Jobs, which is the late Steve Jobs' wife. And then, a number of other investors and stuff, both on the East Coast and West Coast as we've grown. Like to date, we've probably raised a little over $10 million in capital, I think.
Congratulations. That's amazing. How big is your team now?
We just did a bunch of hiring. We're at 30 now.
So you're still relatively a small business.
Yeah, and I think the big benefits with tech in business in general is that when you have a highly effective and a highly focused team, you can do a lot without having hundreds of people. And the mistake that I made when I first started, like when you first started, you so resource starved that as soon as you get money in the bank, you just want to hire everyone that you can think of, fill every single role, and that doesn't necessarily make you move faster. And what I've learned over the years is having one good hire is better than having 2 or 3 mediocre people. And what I've done is like my hiring process is so slow to the points where candidates would be like, damn, is this process ever going to end? Because I'll take 3 months to hire somebody. I'll take my time. I'm in no rush whatsoever. And the first sign I see that you're shaky, gone. Like I'll fire extremely fast and I'll hire really, 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 really slow. So, and I've learned that over the years just because a lot of times we end up hiring fast and we end up firing slow in the reverse. And by the time when you have one bad person in the culture, one bad person on the team, it really impacts the team.
Yes, it does.
And by the time you finally decide to let a low performer go, everyone is relieved. Be like, damn, what took you so long? Because this was really making our work harder. Because no one wants. Just imagine if you're married or you have a girlfriend or whatever, you know that feeling of damn, somebody's not pulling their weight, they're not doing their part, and I'm doing it all. And no one likes to feel like that. And that's literally how your team feels when you're slow about getting a low performer off the team. So that's why I really focus on taking my time to really evaluate, making sure someone's a real good culture fit. Because I would prefer to have someone who I have to train and who may not have the fancy resume and the fancy background, but is a good culture fit, over someone who tells me, what fancy school they went to. That's just my personal preference. But yeah, that's just my strategy and approach to.
I think it's an incredibly great philosophy on hiring and also firing. I think it's necessary in business. You got to keep it moving. Just something I want to pull out that you said: hire slow, fire fast.
Yeah.
Who are your competitors?
So we have a couple now that, so now the business has grown to, we have consumer products in 3 categories. So one of the most famous one is our phone service, which allows people to save money on expensive prison phone calls. And then we have our financial services, which makes it easy for people to send money to like commissary books. Think of it as like a Venmo or a Cash App. Just makes the process really easy and seamless. And then finally, our postal mail services, which is where we started. But that allows people to send things like greeting cards, postcards, photos, letters, etc., directly from their cell phone, tablet, computer. And then now we have a B2G or business to government facing product, in addition to our consumer product, that we sell to institutions to allow them to scan and screen the mail that they receive. So the problem that institutions have is that, particularly with the increased use of synthetic drugs, opioids, K2, Suboxone, things like that, there's more synthetic drugs coming into institutions, and these can easily be incorporated into paper or ink. So it's not something you can prevent and screen traditional ways. So there's no way to know that, a letter has opioids in it or not, so without significant expense in lab testing and things like that. So basically what our software does is allow them to authenticate to make sure that something was shipped from a secure facility and it doesn't have contraband in it. Because there's been a number of cases where spike in inmate overdoses and deaths, and then in addition to staff members getting sick from working in the mailrooms and things like that. So with those 2 products, our focus has taken us down a path of being more involved in government, being more part of policy, laws and policy getting written. I've gotten a crash course on how to navigate things through Congress and stuff like that. Really not understanding how government works, not having a better understanding how government really moves behind all the smoke and mirrors of what you see on TV, what's really moving initiatives in the government. That's really the pace and where we are today.
In terms of your business model, is this an independent company? Meaning, do you guys have to split profits with the facilities or with the state itself?
No, so that's what's different from us. And I don't think I even answered your last question well. So when you look at the competition in our space, you think of the 2 big players in this area is like Securus and Global Telling. And those are the ones that get all the bad press about predatory practices and overcharging for phone calls and things like that. The main key distinction between how they do business and how we do business is the industry. What Securus and Global Telling does is that they will give the prison a contract and say, we'll handle your phone calls. We'll do your phone calls for you. And in response to that, we're going to if you give us the contract to handle your phone calls, we're going to charge the consumers whatever you want. And then we're going to promise you a kickback for giving us this contract. So if you give us this contract, we'll give you back $100,000 a year for giving us this contract. And because of that business model, it creates a situation where the prices are higher because now they added the kickbacks that they're giving the facilities into the pricing, and the consumers, the family members, they're the ones that end up having to pay for that. Our process is basically, strictly to the consumers. If we can save you money on phone calls, it's cheaper for you to be our customer than to not use us. So, for example, if you don't use us, you're going to pay $70 if you're talking to someone in federal prison. If you use us, that same cost is going to be $18, which is the lowest it can be. And that's not even our cost. That's just the lowest that the prison is going to charge is $18. So not being our customer is more expensive than being our customer. So on that side, the consumer just pays for that, and that's $5 a month. When it comes to what we sell to the government pays for that, and there's no kickbacks involved. It comes directly out the operational budget. So our approach is very different. We don't believe in the kickback system. I think that's part of the main reason why the marketing industry is so predatory, is because that's probably one of the only legal kickbacks that you'll see, particularly in government contract, where it's legal to award the government back money based on them awarding you a contract.
Because of this reason, have you found that your company is not allowed to be used in certain institutions, or are you guys available in all institutions?
Yeah, we're available in most institutions. We've had times in the early days where, those companies will arbitrarily block our phone numbers because they know that we was giving lower rates and lower costs to people. And we had to take it to court. So, eventually the FCC ruled that institutions or prison phone companies, not institutions, prison phone companies do not have the ability to, or do not have the right to dictate to consumers, you and me, who's on the outside, what phone company we use. So if you want to use Vonage, you want to use Pigeon League, you want to use AT&T, that's your choice. And a prison phone provider can't arbitrarily just block you because you're using Pigeon because they don't like the fact that it's giving you a lower rate.
Before we close the interview, what does your revenue model look like? Are you guys making money per phone call, per picture sent, or is it a subscription model?
Yeah, it's a subscription model. So basically it's a flat rate. You pay $5 a month and you can pick and choose what product you want to use. And we don't limit your minutes. We don't limit the number of photos you can send. We don't limit the number of letters you can send or whatever. You use it as much as you want.
So for $5 a month, I'm on the outside. I have somebody I love and care about on the inside. I pay Pigeonly $5, unlimited phone call, unlimited pictures I can send. Is this all wrapped up into this one $5?
Yeah, so depending on what product you use, you pay $5. If you do the phone, that's $5. If you want to do letters, that's $5. But then you can switch and match it. So let's say 1 month you're paying $5 a month, you want to use the phone service, you can use the phone service. And let's say next month you say, I don't want to use the phone service, I want to use letter service. You'll just pay $5 again and just use the letters. Or if you want to use phones and letters at the same time, you'll pay $10 a month.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
So you basically can build a la carte your plan based on how you communicate. Because one of the things we learned, and we researched this because we wasn't sure how to set the business model, and this came after years of iterations and research, we realized that different people like to communicate different ways. There's some people that communicate through photos. For me, my friends, I send them photos. I send them photos of pretty girls on IG and all that. That's how I communicate. I'm not doing the phone calls. But there's some other people, their main is phone calls and postcards. So everyone communicates differently based on what they're used to. So we basically designed it so people could mix and match and build their communication plan exactly how they want.
Can people cancel their subscription at any time? And if so, is there a fee?
No fee. Cancel whenever you want.
Cancel whenever you want.
Yeah.
I asked you this offline. How has COVID affected your business?
Yeah, I think the big challenge for us with COVID was transitioning everyone to work from home, and more so from a infrastructure and management process. When you have people in the office, it's easier for people to communicate to each other. Information flows really quickly and rapidly. But then when people start working remotely, we're using Slack and other things, and things, when people are not used to that, it might take a little bit longer for the engineering team, for example, to collaborate on what they have to build and things like that. So for us, it was mainly getting people used to the new mode of doing things, working remote, and getting that transition. But from a consumer side, a customer side, there really hasn't been much of a change. It's been mostly just adjusting to working remote and putting new management processes in place and things like that, just to keep everyone in sync. Now that everyone is working all from different locations.
Fred, I love your story, man. I'm truly inspired by you, and I cannot wait for my audience to really hear this journey of yours. It is so inspiring. Speaking to you, and I want to say this before we close out, because had I not known your story, there is nothing about you, from your presentation to your choice of wordings, there's nothing about you that screams ex-con. Right. I want people to look at you and listen to you and understand that all of our young men and all of our young women who are locked up, this stigma that we have about them and what America has really cast this terrible image of what an ex-con is, you defy all stereotypes. You're well-spoken, you're well-mannered, you have an extensive vocabulary, and you're a businessman earning money honestly. So I thank you on behalf of all of us, Black and brown people, for for presenting yourself in a way that really dismisses and dispels this stigma that most people have of ex-cons and ex-felons. I love your story, and I think that you're doing extremely well in representing our community. Where can people find you at?
On Facebook, it's just my name, Frederick Hutson. On Instagram, I am Fast Freddy. Twitter, same thing. I am Fast Freddy on Twitter as well.
I just want to point one thing out. You spell it because it can be confused with Hudson. It is spelled Hutson. Correct?
Yeah, correct. HUT.
Fred, you are a true power move maker, and I thank you so much for all that you've done and all that you've shared with our audience. Continue blessings and success.
Appreciate it.
My brother. What's up, guys? Thanks for sticking with me to the end of the video. Truly appreciate you. If you like anything you heard here today, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. And if you know anybody that can benefit from this message, feel free to share. Peace and love.